Okay, right now as we speak, second by second, the biggest databases ever created are getting bigger. And normally they're databases about us. Data about our shopping habits, or our online activity, or data from devices we carry with ourselves, or devices we have in our homes. And there are legitimate worries about what's being done with this data by corporations or governments, why and how it's being collected, is there transparency, is it being kept secure from people who'd use our private data against us? So the whole topic of big data can seem a bit scary. It can seem like something that's been done to us and not for our benefit. I want to tell the other story of big data. It's used by ordinary people to promote research and learning and activism and curiosity. And I think this is going to be looked back on as one of the bits of good news, one of the big achievements of this period. First of all, I've got to explain the term structured data. What is it? Why should you want it? If you know something, you can just write it down, can't you? Well, yeah, you can see that that's a fact. And when you look at that, you intuitively know that the first part is an identifier for a person, and the last phrase identifies another individual, and then there's the middle bit which describes the relation between them. This is processing that your brain does intuitively, and you don't even realize it, to see the fact beyond the string of words. Even if you don't know who Lord Byron is, you know that that's a proper name of a human being. And something like Poet Lord, that may be a cool rap name, but it's not a name, it's not a proper name. So computers aren't good at this. We need to spell it out. So if we want to represent this in a computer, we need a representation of Ada Lovelace. So it's just something in the computer that stands for her, and of course Lord Byron, and then a representation of the property has father and in the right direction. This is something called a triple. So it's a representation of a fact. But we can't use the names because names cause problems. One name can be shared by several very different things. So let's not use the names. Let's just give them identifiers. It's arbitrary. Just give them identifiers in the computer, and then we can make the connection to human language. And all these things are known by other names, of course. So they could be known by other names, and it's still the same fact. And this way, we get language independence. So the same fact is represented in other human languages, and it's still the same fact. This is just considering one fact, one relation between things. And obviously, these things have other properties. So there's family tree properties, there's connection to creative works. So Ada Lovelace wrote a computer program and she published it. Lord Byron wrote poetry. There are memberships of organizations. So imagine the web expanding, and imagine other people being brought in through family tree relations, going forward in time, backward in time. Connection to creative works, author of a book, or person depicted in artwork. Person founder of an organization or employed by an organization. Organization has a headquarters. Headquarters is the location. Location is in a political state. The web keeps going. It could be potentially hundreds of millions of items, people, organizations, occurrences, locations. Eventually you get something like this. So one web covering history, geography, sciences, the arts. This is what I'm talking about as a structural data representation of human knowledge and culture. So if you think about a database as it's a lot of numbers in the computer, don't think of it like that. Think of it as what's got a nodes and arcs model. This is a representation of a world, the real world, historical world, could be a fictional world. These are the Marvel characters. All at once. So representing the things in that world and representing the relations between them. There are already lots of these nodes and arcs models. So each disk in this display is one such database, but they're normally very specialized. So they're to do with publishing or government data or scientific outputs. I want to talk about one that's a kind of a hub. It's kind of a hub to which all these other databases can connect, and its scope is much bigger than all of them. So you're aware of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a volunteer effort to write a summary of human knowledge and culture in an encyclopedia and share it for free. Wikipedia is part of the Wikimedia family of projects, and the latest one of those is Wikidata. So this is the structured data representation. It matters that it's Wikimedia doing this, because unlike the other internet big names, Wikimedia doesn't have shareholders, it doesn't have advertisers, it's not mining your activity to find how you can be marketed to. It's doing this just out of a belief that it is good that you should have access to this and that everybody should have access to this. And something that Wikidata shares with Wikipedia is the edit button. So if you find something's missing, you can click edit and you can add it. You're probably aware there are lots of language versions of Wikipedia. There's an English Wikipedia and a French Wikipedia, Vietnamese Wikipedia, and so on. There's one Wikidata. So there's one model that different language communities are working on together. To recap, we're building a summary of human knowledge and culture in structured data, and we're sharing it for free. And this isn't a proposal. It's a young project. We've got a lot of it done, but this is happening. And you can help. At the moment, we have hundreds of languages, tens of thousands of active contributors, some formal contributions from culture institutions and researchers and other organizations, tens of millions of things described. Like I said, they could be people, organizations, creative works, publications, billions of statements. If you want some more precise numbers, so that there's more than 4 million people, more than 5 million places. If you're into science, we have large numbers of genes, proteins, scientific publications, species. What do you do with it when you've made it? Well, there is a language called Sparkle. And Sparkle is a language for asking questions of a huge nodes and arcs database. So it's a bit of computer code, and you don't need to worry about the details of this, but this is something that asks the question, which scientist has published the most papers about the Zika virus? So you ask the question, you get an answer. This asks, has there been an actor who has played a role and then played the same role at least 40 years later? So the question could be about anything, and if you can frame it in this language, you can ask it and get its answer. But we don't want it always in that format. This is a tool, you put in some Sparkle, and it gives you the answer in the form of a timeline, and it's color-coded and interactive and animated, and it's great. That's another free tool built onto Wikidata. Maybe you want a map. So this is what Wikidata knows about near here in Central Bath. So these are historic buildings or monuments or organization headquarters. They're locations with significance. The red dots lack a photo. So if you go to this site and click on one of the red dots, you can upload a photo, turning the red dot to green, helping to build up the model of the world. Computers can make Sparkle queries, so they can send off a question in the background to Wikidata, and then the answer comes back to Wikidata, presents it back to you. So educational applications like this that I'm building about historic periods, they can be much smaller and they can be developed much more rapidly. So this is geeky stuff, but it doesn't matter. Those who can code and who know this language can build things that the rest of us can interact with by clicking or on a mobile device or whatever. This is Wikidata's view of the world. And you can see inequality in the map. You can see there are gaps where there are interesting, significant things, where there are locations and events, but they're not so well documented. There are geographic inequalities in the ability to get and share data. For technological reasons, do people have broadband? For political reasons, with censorship, for cultural reasons. Looking over history, past generations made decisions about what was worth sharing and writing down for the future, and maybe they made those decisions differently from how we would make them. So looking at historical data, it's harder to get verifiable data about women and their achievements than it ought to be. So we have to be proactive. We have to look beyond our narrow interests and look to other topics that are not the easy things to do, and we need to be very positively welcoming to people from different parts of the world and different cultures who want to join in and help us build this. Even if we make it complete, it's still just a database, so it's part of the story. We can inform political debate by describing from the database what are the different political systems in the world and tell us about their economy or their crime rate or their poverty rate. But we've still got to have the political discussion. We've still got to spell out at length the arguments for and against that political idea. So we need narrative, we need context. The poverty rate is a useful set of numbers, but it doesn't tell you what it's like to live in poverty. So we need other formats. We need the encyclopedia. We need other media like video. And also data can kind of take on a kind of authority. Data means given. So once something's in the computer, it can seem like, well, that's it, that's settled. And we've got to avoid that temptation. We should be able to challenge and question any claim. And this is one way that Wikidata is very cleverly designed, because it can have a source or sources for every statement. So if a source turns out to be unreliable or retracted or fake, we can reflect that. If you only trust certain sources, certain peer-reviewed journals, we can query only things that have that basis. So what are people doing with this? I'll just give a few examples of things I think are inspiring. My Society is a charity, and they have this project to document every legislature around the world. So take a point on the Earth's surface, who represents that in the relevant parliament, which election did they get in, what are their demographics, age and gender and so on, what laws have they supported or opposed. That's a useful thing to have, and so they're using Wikidata as a platform for part of that. Big data is potentially a surveillance technology, but it doesn't have to be us under surveillance. It could be us using the technology to put public institutions and private institutions under surveillance, getting voting records, getting politicians' expenses, getting shared directives between different companies, different conflicts of interest. This is a project at the University of Cambridge doing something really ambitious. So they're scanning peer-reviewed scientific papers and extracting facts into Wikidata. So if you're interested in paracetamol, say, rather than doing thousands of searches for all of the different names and trademarks and chemical formulae that paracetamol is known by, through lots of databases, potentially millions of papers in biology and chemistry and medicine, the computer does the scan and offers up the bits of text to human users, and they decide if there's a fact there that can be integrated into Wikidata. Once you do that, you can build up a profile of, say, a scientist's career, or you can get all of the peer-reviewed papers that mention a particular disease, or all of the peer-reviewed papers that mention a particular protein. So it gives us a new way into the scientific literature and gives us a new view of the scientific literature in terms of the things it's about. Not just science, this is potentially giving us a sort of growing dashboard of culture, all different types of artistic work from different periods and human civilizations. So we can have a specific question like, show me self-portraits of women, and get answers aren't from a particular museum or collection, but from lots of different museums and collections. Museums are doing great things with their websites and putting in interactive views of their collection, but however impressive the interactive gallery they make, it's not going to be as impressive as something that draws on hundreds of different museums and galleries and libraries. And this is a project to using Wikidata to describe words in human languages, so potentially all languages, so relating to different forms of the word, relating to equivalent words in other languages, relating them to senses. Each of these things would be impressive, or at least nice to have, right? A bibliographic database, a linguistic database, a geographical gazetteer. Each of those would be an advance, but the fact that they're all the same thing, it's all the same database, that's what's really transformative. That's what allows us to ask questions that we couldn't ask before. So the opportunity is open to contribute. There's a team of developers, there's a small staff team, but Wikidata is being built by ordinary people, or by sometimes formally by arrangement with cultural institutions or researchers, people who have data, public institutions. But if you know something you want to share with the world, find out how to do it and you can go in and add it. Better still, Learn Sparkle. Join the community of people who just find interesting questions. Could be professional interest, could be just amusement. Find questions, and then we share them, we tweet them out, revise them. Better still, if you can code, just grab a chunk of Wikidata, download it, and build something out of it. So this is a platform for educational games driven by Wikidata. It's the open source ethos. So the open source and open data. You can just take stuff, you don't have to ask permission or get it signed off. Just take, and we're interested to see what you build and the rest of us will use. And better still, promote that ethos through whatever organizations you work in, charities, public sector. What can you usefully share to make this resource better for everybody? And maybe this is a bad metaphor, because a tool gets worn down by overuse. But knowledge isn't like that. Knowledge is more useful and valuable the more it's shared, the more people have it. So the toolbox is open, we can all contribute. If we all contribute a bit, then we all get to use something which is really fantastic and complete and incredibly useful. And then it becomes not just somebody's achievement or an organization's achievement, it's a human achievement. Thank you very much.